Okay, you can go on now.
So, my name is Grady Beber. I'm a Vietnam veteran from the United States Army. I was drafted in 1969 and began my service with the Army March 3rd, 1969, and went to Fort Bragg, North Carolina for my basic training. After that, I went to Fort Benjamin Harrison, Indiana for some advanced training, and then to Fort Riley, Kansas for Vietnam training. I was sent to Vietnam and wound up in an ordnance company unit there where they trained me on the job training. It was location was about 100 miles north of Saigon and a little bit east uh, near a place that was known as Bearcat. Um, what I did in an ordnance company, we field stored ammunition, everything from large howitzer shells, 105s, 155, hand grenades of all sizes and shapes, including the M79 grenade launcher, ammo, trip flares, anything that any type of munitions that an infantry person may need, or for the defense of a base camp. Um, we stored the ammunition and guarded it. The North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong were constantly trying to blow up our ammunition along with us with either rockets or mortars, um, more rockets than anything else. They would set up rockets in a mountain area north of us at night under the cover of darkness and then slip out. And they usually hit us uh, early in the morning, and then when the daylight came, and then of course by that time the Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese had slipped out of the area where they'd set those rockets up on timers, and they were actually long gone by the time those rockets went off. But anyway, it was quite a challenge. And part of my duty was to guard the perimeter of the area where we uh, our base camp and where we worked, where we stored the ammunition and guarded it. And I was on guard duty one night in a guard bunker and experienced enemy activity out in front of our bunker. Uh, Called in artillery from behind us, and the next day we had to go out and pull what we call a sweep. We would line up, soldiers would line up side by side about 10 feet apart and walk as a unit across an area to call clearing the area, make sure there's no enemy soldiers left in the area. And I was walking along, soldiers to the right and left of me, and all of a sudden I looked down. There was a wire. No, let me back up. A soldier to my right stuck his arm out and said, "Halt." I looked down and there was a wire running from a bamboo pole over to my left into the ground over to the right. We pulled back. Our emergency ordnance disposal unit came up, set off a charge, and there was enough explosives there to blow up a tank.
Oh my goodness.
So, anyway, that's one of my real close experiences with death, other than being bombarded with rockets and mortars when they were trying to hit our ammunition and blow it up.
Was that pretty much on a daily basis for that?
No, it wasn't. It was on about, I would say, the rocket attacks were about once every other week, was what I recall. About once every other week that we would have the rocket attacks. And I remember about 3 days before I left, I woke up in the middle of the night and I, I heard incoming rockets falling in. And I grabbed my sleep gear and headed toward the sandbag bunker outside where we slept. And a buddy of mine says, "Bever, where you going?" And I remember saying to him, "We're getting hit, Cablin, we're getting hit. I'm going to the sandbag bunker. I've made it this long. I'm not going to die in this hellhole now."
Right.
And so I went into the sandbag bunker. I was only there a minute or so, and all of a sudden, my buddy comes in and, "Move over, Beber. Damn if I'm going to die in this hellhole either." And so we stayed in that sandbag bunker, and the incoming rockets just poured in all night long. The ground just shook, and it was like a thunderstorm. And so the next day, we had quite a devastation. That was 3 days before I left. And so anyway, that's another close call that I had while I was in Vietnam.
Wow.
And there were others, the rifle fire and
Mm-hmm.
rockets fall in and around me. Thank goodness I wasn't injured by any of them, but I had a lot of close calls. Unfortunately, a lot of the people that I served with didn't make it out alive, and some of them made it out in pieces. So I feel very fortunate to be here today
Yes, sir.
talking with you. I'd like to start back again. My name is Grady Beber. I grew up over in Rowan County near Salisbury, North Carolina. I grew up out in the county there south of Salisbury in a little community called China Grove, and went to the Rowan County school system, graduated from South Rowan High School. I went to Mitchell College over in Statesville for 2 years, and then I was drafted because I was going part-time to college, and so part-time, going to college part-time and working. And so anyway, I was drafted, and I received a letter from my Rowan County Draft Board that stated, "Your friends and neighbors have selected you to uh, be a member of the Armed Forces of the United States of America." And I remember telling one of my friends, I said, "Heck, they're not my friends and neighbors." Well, I was just joking.
Mm-hmm.
But I went ahead and I signed up for an extra year to get a school I wanted. And so I wound up serving 3 years in the Army. I served in Vietnam for a year. I went to Vietnam in July of 1969 and came back to the States briefly in July of 1970. I was then assigned to Germany, where I went to another munitions depot in Germany, a nuclear weapons depot there, um, near a place called Miesau was the name of the town in Germany. And I served there for 18 months before leaving the Army. After I left the Army, I had the GI Bill to help complete my education, so I went to Appalachian State here in North Carolina, and I got my bachelor's degree in business administration. I worked for 16 years in the furniture industry after that, and manufacturing supervision. And then after that, I went to work for the state as an OSHA inspector. And in 2015, I retired from North Carolina OSHA as a supervisor in the Winston-Salem office. And so now I'm retired and I live here in Raleigh, out in the country south of Raleigh. I don't live in the city. I live out in the county here south of Raleigh.
Yeah.
Do you have any specific questions you'd like to ask me?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay.
And for my part, Edward Danio, for course title HIWD 375, summer 2017 D term, and instructor is Dr. Glenn Slater. You've already actually answered a few of my questions I had because you already spoke about how you were drafted. Now, if you hadn't been drafted, would you have possibly have signed up, or had this been just a draft situation?
I may have signed up. A large number of my extended family had served in the military,
Okay.
and I did have an interest in serving at some time, but just that I was a little surprised by being drafted, and so when that happened, I decided just to go ahead on into the military
Okay.
and pick up my education when I came out.
Got you. And You said it was 1969, correct? So you probably one other question I had is, what did you maybe know about Vietnam before you were drafted? And I'm guessing it had been on the news a lot, probably. So did you know where it was? Know a lot about it before you actually
I
got
knew
sent?
I knew other people who had been to Vietnam,
Mm-hmm.
and of course, I was, I was a history enthusiast,
Mm-hmm. As you
and
said, yeah.
I watched the news on a regular basis. So I basically knew what was going on there,
Gotcha.
and so it wasn't a real surprise to me.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Mm-hmm. What were your feelings about the war? Did you think we should be there, or and if you whether or not you did think you should be there, did that change being there yourself?
yes,
That opinion.
I thought we should be there. Our mission was to help the South Vietnamese people
Mm-hmm.
maintain their democratic style of government. And, I felt like I was doing what my country had asked me to do,
Right.
as other people had fought in areas such as Korea for the same reason.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, I envisioned South Vietnam being a free state, and I can't begin to tell you how how much it wrenched my heart when years later, when I saw on television the North Vietnamese hooking a cable to the American soldier statue in Saigon and pulling it down by one of our own tanks.
Oh wow.
I have actually seen that statue and have driven it around it in a Jeep, and I was heartbroken to see that and to know that we left those Vietnamese people so early and so quickly. It was almost like pulling the rug out from under them, and
Right.
I will for always have an ache in my heart because of the way we left Vietnam.
Mm-hmm. And that leads me to my question I was going to ask you next. Because you said your mission, like you said, was to preserve the South Vietnamese democracy and help the people. And so my next question was, do you feel we accomplished our mission? And it sounds like to me we might have, like you said, we pulled out earlier than we should. Like the politics might have failed us in them.
In my personal opinion, our political system failed us here in the United States
Right.
because it wasn't, well, we were there for over 10 years,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
it was a long, protracted war, and I certainly understand why the American people might have been weary of war. But as a soldier who fought there, I thought that we left those people pretty much defenseless.
Oh, yeah.
Uh, when I was there, we had weapon systems that we wouldn't have let the South Vietnamese army or civilians get anywhere near. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure when we left, it was almost like, well, here they are. You figure out how to use them.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, all the personnel left as well. I just feel like we did not finish our obligation in Vietnam.
Right. For you personally, do you think you would have done anything different in your time in Vietnam? Is there anything you wish you could have did different or would have done different?
No, I can't think
Good.
of anything I would have done differently. Um, I, I didn't try to be a hero.
Right.
I was there to do a job and try to stay alive and do my job at the same time. I guess I was successful as far as that goes because I'm still here.
Mm.
And but anyway, it was all the people I served with were pro-military. They were understood why we were there and didn't seem to have any problems about being there
Right.
and serving their country.
Now,
And
I'm sorry. Go ahead, sir. I'm sorry. While over there, because like you said, you knew your mission, you understood, you guys were all right, you thought you should be there. Do you think the mission should have changed at all? Do you think the way the government and the way the general, how the war was being run, did you guys, being that you were in the field and you were there all the time, probably around the Vietnamese, did you think they should have been doing something different throughout the war? Like, should they have made different decisions, or do you think they were making the right decisions? They just
Well,
didn't
the
take
only
it
thing I
to
can
the next
say
part.
is I would like to have seen we call them ARVNs,
Oh, okay.
the South Vietnamese military. I would like to have seen them uh, uh, take on more responsibility before we left. I would like to have seen them have more access to our large weapon systems and, our air power.
Gotcha.
Seems like they were, uh, we did not, in my opinion, we did not train those people sufficiently before we
Mhm.
left so that they could defend themselves.
Right, because you said when I guess America pulled out, you kind of left most like a lot of equipment there, and you were like, here you
Oh,
go, and
oh,
you
that's right.
really, do you think they might have stood a little bit better chance if we had probably taught
There's,
them at least how
there's,
to use it a little bit better instead of
there's no
staying
doubt
home?
in my mind about that.
Yeah. Um, Now, when you were stationed, because you were the ordnance, did you, besides just guard duty, not, but just besides guarding and maintaining that supply, were you part of any like major offenses or defenses in the region?
Um, the only thing I can say, I was there during the time that during the invasion of Cambodia,
Oh, okay.
and the invasion of Cambodia took place in the early part of May in 1970, and about 2 months prior to that invasion, we worked night and day to be sure that we had supplies in terms of ordnance
Okay.
for all the units that were going in. And so it was just, we worked hard and we got hit hard a lot of times
I bet.
because the enemy evidently knew there was something going on. They didn't know what, but they knew we were stockpiling ammunition that we had never stocked before. And they were feverishly trying to blow it up. Um, so anyway, for me, that was one of the toughest times. It was like 24 hours a day and going on 4 hours sleep,
Oh,
and
wow.
it was not a fun time. But we made it through,
Hmm.
and I was awarded the Army Commendation Medal as a result of my endurance through that period of time,
Yes, sir.
and I'm proud of that.
As you should be. Um, Now, when you were over there doing this, and especially the invasion in Cambodia you're part of, did you guys know that was going on, or you just knew you were supporting an operation, or why we were invading
We did
Cambodia?
not, we as a support unit
Right.
did not really know what was what big event was going to happen, but we knew
Gotcha.
it was big. We knew it was much bigger than anything we had seen before, and that something major was just around the corner.
Hmm.
And of course, when after it broke, our officers got us together and explained to us what was going on and why we had been asked to extend ourselves so much
Hmm.
for a 2 month period of time and so forth and so on. So as soon as we went into Cambodia, we support units were informed about what was going on.
Nice. Um, so when you came home, did you feel like were things able to get back to normal very easily? Were you treated? I know the political climate back home might have been different. So were you treated differently? Good, bad? What was maybe some of the experiences coming home?
When I arrived in San Francisco,
Hmm.
I recall walking from the plane to the terminal, and outside the terminal and in the terminal, there were groups of hippie type people uh, spitting at us and
Mm.
shouting unpleasantries, shall I say. Um, so it was really a unwelcome welcome.
Right.
Uh, it was a very sad way to come home.
Very. Totally understand. When you got back to North Carolina, was it a little bit different when you came back
Yeah,
to North Carolina?
North Carolina was
More respectful.
more respectful of the military. We have a lot of military bases here in North
Mhm.
Carolina, so I think that had something to do with it. But I think for the most part, the average North Carolinian had more respect for military service and what the people who had been to Vietnam
Totally understand.
experienced.
So, as a one, how did your participation in Vietnam, especially like you had said, you were kind of really enjoyed history and you didn't know you were going to be part of it when you got in, but how did that affect the rest of your life, like going forward? What was the impact on your life?
Oh, it was positive. It was very positive.
That's good.
I know there are a lot of people who came home from that war who had very serious physical injuries
Mhm.
and mental problems. And I understand why. After having been there, I understand why. But I was able to live a relatively normal life. And I say that the experience helped me in that it hardened me.
Right.
Um, I my perspective about things that happen in life was a lot different. Things
Mhm.
that used to bother me a lot just rolled off my back like water off a duck's back because I was able to to look at the small things and say, uh, based on where I've been, this is not really a problem. It's a
Right.
situation. It's not a serious problem. When
Mhm.
prior to that, I might have thought it was a serious problem. But I had a different outlook on life totally, especially with respect to small problems.
Yeah.
um, but as I say, I came back. I went to Appalachian State, majored in business, and had a very successful career in the furniture industry and in OSHA here in North
Mhm.
Carolina. I've married and have two children, a fine son and a fine daughter,
Right.
and I feel like that. I was very lucky to have made it through Vietnam and not suffered any type of injuries, physical or mental, to the best of my knowledge. Uh, but anyway, I just feel fortunate to be here today, to have had an opportunity to serve in the military, come out, without any serious injuries, and to come back and go to college and have the GI Bill to help me get through college. And I feel very fortunate to be here today to iterate this history to you.
And I much appreciate it. Yes, sir. Is there anything else you'd like to express for us in the class?
I can't really say anything other than what we've already discussed.
Mm-hmm.
I was pro uh, uh, military and pro what was going on in Vietnam.
Right.
I would like to have seen us train the South Vietnamese army or military, as it were, uh, to a higher degree than we did to help them, defend themselves when we left.
Right.
I will always regret the way that we left. I feel like we literally jerked the rug out from under the South Vietnamese people
Mm-hmm.
and left them defenseless. And I will always feel bad about that.
Right.
I will always feel bad about that.
Well, thank you so much, sir. It's been a pleasure.
You're welcome.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you for coming by to talk with
Oh,
me.
much appreciated.